Today's session is a culturally engaging approach, emissaries for graduate student diversity. I am Dr. Bianca D. Evans Donaldson, Assistant Dean for Diversity and Inclusion in the University Graduate School at Indiana University. So, to put this in context, Indiana University is located in Bloomington, Indiana. We are the flagship campus. Founded in 1820, we just celebrated our bicentennial of 200 years of existence. Have enrollment of 44,000 students total, with about 10,000 being graduate and professional students. Have 24% domestic minority enrollment and have a number of graduate programs that are ranked, highly ranked in the top 10. A little about our office in the University Graduate School. The Office of Diversity and Inclusion focuses on creating an inclusive and also multicultural educational landscape through the recruitment and retention of diverse students. Typically, those students have been traditionally underrepresented in graduate education. Our office works campus-wide on a number of initiatives. Today, we're going to highlight our Emissaries for Graduate Student Diversity program. We provide assistance campus-wide to graduate students, faculty members, and also staff members. Have funding through our president's office, also our provost's office, and the University Graduate School. So, an overview of what we'll be talking about today, we're going to review student retention theories and models, look at some research on underrepresented student retention and services. We want to apply theory to practice and talk about our Emissaries for Graduate Student Diversity program. We want to give some tips for developing an underrepresented graduate student recruitment and retention strategy. And then we will end with some recommendations and a conclusion. So first, we're going to look at student retention theories and models. We're going to look at the historical background of student retention studies. When we think about the student attrition phenomenon, there's been a major concern for educational institutions and educators since the establishment of the formal education system. Theoretical models arising from the systemic study of the phenomenon were not developed until the early 1970s. You can divide the development of student retention studies chronologically into 9 eras as listed in the table. These eras start from the prehistory of student retention, when retention was not considered an issue because graduating was not the goal of students. And it continues to the current era in which the theoretical and conceptual frameworks of the phenomenon have been established and implications set. You could divide these eras into 2 main categories. In the first category, you could group all of the eras before the 1960s, 4 eras together, as they share a lack of systematic approach towards student retention. The second category includes the last 5 eras, starting from the 1960s and continuing until the present. During this period, student retention became a global concern, and consequently, systematic and theoretical models were developed. When we look at the development of student retention theoretical models, when we look at before the 1970s, various attempts were made to study the student attrition phenomenon. However, the focus of these studies was principally on the characteristics of individual students rather than on their interactions with college environments. The student attrition phenomenon was often explained in terms of student characteristics, personal attributes, and shortcomings. Previous studies had been grounded in psychology rather than sociology. One comment by Spady, 1970, noted that these studies lacked theoretical and empirical coherence, conceptual clarity, methodological rigor, complexity of design, breadth, and analytic sophistication, which are supposed to define theoretical basis. During the late 1960s and 70s, systematic studies and attempts to conceptualize retention frameworks that included the notion of student-college relationship became more common. By the 1970s, the era of building retention models had begun, largely with Williams' 1971 work, Dropouts from Higher Education, and Interdisciplinary Review and Synthesis. This was the first sociological student retention model. By the 1970s, the introduction of the term retention to describe student persistence included the concept that institutions shared responsibility in influencing students' decisions regarding dropout. Since then, many student retention studies have been conducted and theoretical models have been developed. Next, we'll review the leading student retention models. Having briefly presented a historical review of the development of student retention studies and the theoretical and conceptual roots and types of these studies, this section turns to a discussion of the leading student retention theoretical models of the last 4 decades as reported in the literature. These theoretical models have been cited and examined in many recent empirical studies and are usually considered as providing the conceptual foundations of many studies, assisting in understanding the explanations and interpretations of the findings of a number of studies. The models reviewed in this section are the 6 most cited student retention theoretical models as appeared in the available literature. These models are the undergraduate dropout process model, the institutional departure model, the student attrition model, the student faculty informal contact model, and non-traditional student attrition model, and the student retention integrated model. In looking at the first model from Spady, 1970 and 1971, this was the first theoretical and systematic model in the literature of student retention. This work largely began the era of building retention theory. Only after Spady's work did student retention studies and models begin to take into account the impact of student-college relationships on the student retention phenomenon. In 2 consecutive years, Spady, 1970, 1971, published his pioneer sociological work, Dropouts from Higher Education, an Interdisciplinary Review and Synthesis, and Dropouts from Higher Education toward an Empirical Model. In these works, Spady presented and revisited his model of the undergraduate dropout process that has since become the foundation for recent developments in the student retention field. Spady's main assumption was that the outcome of this interaction determines the level of students' integration within the academic and social systems of their institutions and subsequently their persistence. According to Spady, a student's decision to stay or withdraw from his or her academic institution is influenced by 2 main factors in each of 2 systems: grades and intellectual development in the academic system, and normative congruence and friendship support in the social system. The final undergraduate dropout process model is presented in Figure 1. Building on Spady's model, 1970-1971, Tito published the first version of his well-recognized institution departure model, also known as the student integration model. Between 1975 and 1993, this model went through many examinations and revisions by both Tino himself and others. This resulted in the final modified version that you see in Figure 2, Tino 1993. The final version of Tino's model states that colleges consist of two systems, academic and social. Students need to be integrated into both systems to persist in their academic institutions. Academic integration can be measured by the student's grade performance and intellectual development, while social integration is measured by students' interaction with college, societies, peers, and faculty. The model suggests that a student enters college with some goals and commitments. The student's pre-entry attributes, which include the student's family background, skills, and abilities, and prior schooling, shape these initial goals and commitments. According to the model, the student's experience at college, academic and social integration will continuously modify, either weaken or strengthen, his or her level of initial goals and commitments. The model suggests that the subsequent levels of goals and commitments affect the student's decision to stay in or leave the college. The main amendment Tino added to his model was a suggestion that the level of the student's external commitments, such as jobs and family commitments, affect both initial and subsequent layers of his or her goal commitments. The next model is the student attrition model from Bean 1980 and also 1982. In this model, Bean synthesized causal model of student attrition presented in Figure 3. Bean conducted a review of both Tinto's 1975 model and Spady's 1970 and 1971 student attrition models. The model was built to identify the variables that affect student intentions to leave, which is, as argued by Bean, the main indicator of student attrition. To this, Bean categorized the variables from the review student attrition models into the following four main categories: background, organization, environmental and attitudinal, and outcome variables. According to Bean, any student attrition study should include variables from the four categories. Additionally, because this model is not exclusive to a single theoretical foundation, it's possible to adapt it for application in different contexts and types of institutions. By adding or deleting variables within these four categories, researchers can adjust this model. The next model is the student faculty informal contact model by Pascarella 1980. And this model is based off the assumptions of Spady and also Tinto's theoretical models that student interaction with faculty members is an important component of students' integration with the social and academic systems of their institutions. Pascarella presumed that students' more informal interaction with faculty members could increase the level of their institutional commitment and subsequently minimize the risk of withdrawal. He argued that this assumption was supported, especially for students with low institutional commitment, by the findings of his extensive studies of the Tinto model. Pascarella stated that there is not much evidence from previous studies to support the direct influence of student-faculty informal contact on student persistence. Building on this argument, he constructed the model presented in Figure 4. It's a longitudinal model that hypothesizes, among other benefits, positive relationships between the amount of student-faculty informal interaction and student retention, especially during the first year. According to Pascarella, the quality of the informal student-faculty non-classroom contact is influenced by a variety of factors, including initial student differences, the faculty culture and classroom experiences, peer culture involvement, and the size of the institution would all impact student persistence. The fifth model to review is the non-traditional undergraduate student attrition model by Bean and Metzer, 1985. This model is presented in Figure 5. In this model, they argue that it is a completely different structure, and the model focuses on a different type of student, the non-traditional commuter student. Bean and Messer stated that while previous studies have emphasized the important role of social integration within the academic institution on the student's persistence process, this factor has minimal impact on non-traditional students. Rather, non-traditional students seem to be affected principally by environmental factors, including family commitments and other external responsibilities. The conceptual framework of the model is based on 4 sets of variables: academic performance, intent to leave, background and defined variables, and most importantly, environmental variables. First, regarding students' academic performance, the model hypothesizes that students with lower academic performance are more likely to withdraw. It also talks about how, although high school grades do not have direct effects on student attrition, the academic performance of undergraduate students is directly affected by their academic performance in high school. Second, students' intention to leave is influenced more by psychological outcomes than by academic variables. Third, students' high school achievements and their educational goals, among other variables from the category, are the background and defining variables that are expected to influence if a student is to persist or not. Finally, according to the model, student attrition is most directly affected by environmental variables such as finances, work hours, outside encouragement, family responsibilities, and the opportunity to transfer. The last model that we'll look at is the student retention integrated model. Cabrera, Nora, and Castaneda, 1993. This model was developed by merging the variables of 2 distinguished student retention models, Tinto's model of 1975 and Bean's model of 1982. This model consists of all the statistically confirmed variables for both theories. Those variables that are not validated through the initial analysis were excluded from the model, and all similar constructs were merged. The findings of this study indicated that the integration of the 2 models provided a better explanation and understanding of the student attrition process. The model confirmed that environmental variables have a more complex role in the student retention formula than previously perceived by Tinto. This model, they recommended that academic institutions, when designing student retention plans and strategies, focus on the variables that strongly encourage students to persist in their programs of study and seek to address the past behavior of students that have tried to withdraw from the university. They also stress the importance of constant monitoring and revision of these retention plans and strategies by the research units at academic institutions. After reviewing these models, we found that there are some limitations of the student retention theories. One of the most well-recognized model is this idea of generalizability. There are concerns on the limitations of these studies not being generalizable to all. Additionally, one of the criticisms of these student retention studies is that They're particularly focused on traditional academic institutions and also traditional types of students. And lastly, there was a lack of studies on students from underrepresented groups and also part time older students. And thinking about our population that we are trying to recruit and retain, we are looking specifically at underrepresented groups, and also a number of our doctoral students could be part time as well as older students. So, we also wanted to do some research on underrepresented student retention and also services. And in doing this research, we found two additional models that we thought would fit better as a framework for our student ambassador program, our emissary program. The first model was a revised model of retention for African American students at predominantly white institutions by Rogers and Summers from 2008. This model proposed and tested revisions to Bean and Eaton's 2002 model. They stated that this model failed to consider the role that cultural experiences may play in the retention of underrepresented students, particularly those attending predominantly white institutions. The model addressed student attitudes toward their institution, academic self efficacy, motivation, achievement goals, attribution, and ethnic and bicultural identity development. These authors suggested that due to unique cultural experiences, the retention process or those constructs deemed important for retention likely look different for underrepresented student populations. The last model we'll discuss is the culturally engaging campus environment model of college success, which is a model that we ultimately decided to use as a framework for our ambassador program. This model talks about the importance of having a culturally engaging environment to engage prospective and also current students. The goal of this particular model is to increase the likelihood of students persisting to graduation. The model acknowledges that external influences, financial factors, employment, and family influences, and also pre college inputs, academic preparation, academic dispositions at the time of entry, all shape college success, leading to satisfaction, persistence, and also degree completion. We also looked at some previous research regarding our underrepresented graduate students, and we found that a number of our studies suggested the importance of prior socialization to graduate school, student faculty advising relationships, student involvement in organizations or professional associations, student engagement in interventions and programmatic efforts, and peer interactions correlate positively with persistence to the degree. After we did all of this research on retention theories and models, and then also research on underrepresented graduate students' persistence, we decided to apply what we learned to our Emissaries for Graduate Student Diversity program. So, for the history of the Emissary for Graduate Student Diversity program, it was established in 2007 and 8. The program has a mission to broaden the participation of underrepresented students, and then also to build a more inclusive IU Bloomington graduate student community. We found that there was a need for improving both recruitment and retention of underrepresented graduate students. So, our main goal was to focus on connecting our IUB graduate students to assist in various stages of the application process, and then also to be able to provide information and referrals to campus resources. We used the CC model as a framework and we pulled out the focal point of this model that really talks about the degree to which culturally engaging environments exist at post secondary institutions is directly and indirectly through their impact on sense of belonging, academic dispositions, and academic performance associated with success among diverse populations. So the model suggested that the greater the extent to which institutions fostered and maintain these culturally engaging environments, the more likely their environment will allow these diverse populations to thrive in college. So our goal in using this model is to help increase the number of underrepresented graduate students to be both recruited and retained at our institution. So the Emissaries program has both a focus on recruitment and retention of underrepresented students in graduate education. Our recruitment emissaries serve as initial peer contacts for pre-application graduate students. They play a critical role of introducing IU graduate opportunities to diverse and talented prospective students and positively support the university's recruitment, outreach, and advocacy efforts across diverse communities. The retention emissaries work to build a more inclusive graduate student community through formal and informal mentoring activities, particularly for underrepresented and minority students, and to provide for the interchange and exchange of information to facilitate the progression and successful completion of graduate students in their program. For our group of emissaries for graduate student diversity, we typically have 20 to 22 students that participate and they represent majors campus wide. Typically, our emissaries are coming to meet at least 1 hour once a month. They receive a small stipend and they have some additional requirements of attending events, also blogging once per month, and also attending scheduled workshops, campus events, and seminars. We've split our emissaries group into two separate groups, our recruitment emissaries and also our retention emissaries. So in thinking about our recruitment emissaries, typically they are focused more on that pre-application process. So the beginning stages of applying to graduate school and helping students to realize if IU is the right fit for them. Our recruitment emissaries collaborate with a lot of our campus partners. They attend a number of campus events from our student involvement fair to sitting on graduate student panels and also attending our social justice fair. Our recruitment emissaries also attend a number of events, both regionally and also nationally. The picture that is shown is of myself and an emissary, Riddy Sud, that is in the Department of Biology. We were recruiting at a SAGNAS conference last October through November in Hawaii, trying to recruit students. We typically have a schedule of about 34 events, and we have our recruitment emissaries attending a number of these events. We also have what is called a graduate school series for prospective students, and it's called our Grad Chats Live webinar series, where we have a 6-part series on topics from strategies for competitive application, how to apply to IU graduate programs, how to fund your graduate education, a little about why to pursue a master's or doctorate, keys to success in graduate school, and navigating the academy as a diverse student. These sessions are all held on either a Wednesday or a Friday at 7 p.m. And they are 30-minute sessions where we have a panel of our emissaries participating, and then we have time for question and answer. We also have our Getting You into IU program where we host up to 75 students from across the US. It's typically a 3-day event where students come visit with our faculty, staff, departments, and graduate students. We pay their travel, lodging, and meals. Our program was recently recognized as a 2020 Inspiring Program in STEM for this current year. With this particular program, our emissaries role is to serve as official host, and our recruitment emissaries answer questions specifically about applying to Indiana University. Due to COVID-19 this year, we are revamping our program some, and we will actually have a virtual Getting You to IU event, and that is for this fall. Our emissary's role is still being that ambassador for our campus. It's going to be a 1-day event this year, and we're hosting it on October 19th. Emissaries will also participate in a student panel on thriving at IU. In addition to our recruitment emissaries, we also have our retention emissaries, and a little about some of the events that they are doing. They focus on creating a sense of belonging at IU. Particularly, they want to identify concerns and needs, and then they want to try to address some of those issues. Some of the events that we have a graduate diversity networking reception, which is the picture in the bottom, where we invite faculty members, staff, and also graduate students. This past year, we had a reception that brought together about 200 people. We also have smaller networking events, which include partnering with the Latino Graduate Student Association to do a study circle at La Casa, which is one of our cultural centers. We also do game nights and also virtual bingo to build a sense of community with our graduate students. We also do a number of cultural events, and for our retention emissaries, they really want to focus on the importance of the holistic self, and they want to improve students' awareness of the need for creative and innovative thinkers in various fields. So, doing things like having a fitness madness at our rec center, or doing a program like preparing underrepresented leaders in STEM for academistry and research. So either academia and also industry and also research, thinking about what those types of things will look like for your career. They also have a focus on strategies for graduate success. And our retention emissaries do a lot of programming related to public speaking and partnering with our Black graduate student association and also a Latino graduate student association, doing things with Canvas and poetry, and also having a number of panels bringing in faculty members to talk about their experiences with our Master This Unwritten Rules to Surviving Graduate School. It's great to hear from faculty members how they persisted through graduate school and to hear what tips they have to help our current graduate students. Our retention emissaries also work with our Getting You into IU program. Their role is mainly talking about university policies, the culture, and also norms. They also want to demonstrate proficiency in time management and financial literacy. And we have a session during Getting You to IU where our retention emissaries actually talk about some of these topics. Next, I'm going to talk a little about some tips for developing an underrepresented graduate student recruitment and retention strategy. The first piece of that, and what we did at Indiana University, is we thought about this collaborative model of who all we need to be working with to recruit diverse students. And this includes admissions, people in our schools and departments, our director of graduate studies or the chair of the department, working with our student ambassadors like our Emissaries for Graduate Student Diversity program, and also our alumni. We want to work collaboratively with all of these populations and try to engage both in state and out of state pipeline programs and institutions to encourage them to apply to Indiana University. In addition to thinking about our recruitment model, we also want to think about our recruitment and retention model process. So, in that, our first step is implementing a diversity strategy for recruiting and also retention, having that in your strategic plan, having that on your website. Step two, we want to create a recruitment plan that exists in synergy between our schools and colleges and also our graduate admissions departments. We want to know what programs are offered, what type of students they're looking for, and then we want to send that information out to our campus partners. For the third step, we want to understand the limitations of our state and also our regional demographics. And we want to identify some other sources for recruiting underrepresented graduate students. Understanding that I am recruiting from Indiana and understanding the demographics of our state in the Midwest. If we want to diversify our population, we work with a lot of our campus partners, which are historically Black colleges, also minority serving institutions, Hispanic serving institutions. We also reach out to McNair directors and we recruit nationwide. So we are trying to expand and identify other sources for recruiting underrepresented graduate students. And then the last step is after we have spent so much time on recruitment and we actually yield some of these students, we want to develop our cohort with retention events. So focusing on orientation, advising, mentoring programs, events that are sponsored by our ambassador program, like our Emissaries for Graduate Student Diversity, and also workshops. We also lastly want to establish short-term and also long-term goals. We use the GROW model, which stands for goal, current reality, options or obstacles, and will or way forward. In this model, you should think about it like how you plan a journey. First, you decide where you're going, the goal, and establish where you currently are, your current reality. You then explore various routes, the options to your destination, and in the final step, you establish the what. You ensure that you're committed to making the journey and you're prepared for the obstacles that you may meet along the way. It's important to establish these short term and long term goals when thinking about recruitment and also retention initiatives. Lastly, I want to talk a little about recommendations and also a conclusion. So, our recommendation in starting an ambassador program like our Emissaries for Graduate Student Diversity program is to begin with a small group of ambassadors so that you can work out possible issues. You want to seek ambassadors that represent the makeup of your institution. For our emissary group, we have majors represented throughout our university. You also want to secure funding sources so that you can pay them a stipend and also have money for programming funds and also advertising. You want to work collaboratively and inform faculty and supporting staff about this concept of student ambassadors so that they're recognized and utilized whenever possible. You also want to include as many members of faculty and staff as possible during the interview process so that they can help to interview students and also help in the training process. When we're talking about recruiting students to your institution, You need to know about the programs to recruit those students, and our faculty and staff members are great resources for that. You also want to train the next year's group of ambassadors with those finishing their first term. So we have additional meetings at the end of the semester as kind of a transition to help our new ambassadors or emissaries so that they are ready to start working in the summer. You also want to use them to get input on improving the program for the next year. In our office, we spend a lot of time writing and publishing policies and procedures. For example, when our emissaries go to attend recruitment events, they have to wear a Indiana University polo and also their name tag so that they can be identified as an emissary. There may be some other procedures that you also want to put in place. And lastly, you want to publicize the student ambassador program and the university by embracing technological avenues. We use social media a lot for our emissary program, as well as sending out to our deans. These are our new emissaries for the upcoming year. Please utilize them for recruitment and also retention events. I'll just conclude by saying that our student ambassadors, like our emissaries for Graduate Student Diversity Program at Indiana University, are a vital source for recruiting and retaining particularly new underrepresented students who are usually their peers. It's great to utilize our emissaries for both orientation to graduate life and also offering additional services that can lead to an increase in student retention. It's important to prepare well before starting an ambassador program so that you can prevent any failure that can occur. And also remember the importance of choosing and training students to be ambassadors for your university and also drive the program's success. I would like to thank you all for listening and would like to hear from you all about any current issues and best practices that you know of. You could put those in the chat. And lastly, I have my contact information listed. I am Dr. Bianca D. Evans Donaldson, Assistant Dean for Diversity and Inclusion at Indiana University and the University Graduate School. I have my email listed as well as our emissary email and blog site listed. Thank you for your time.